Hi, David. I hope you're well and that you had a lovely Thanksgiving and reading week. Let's get right into it. So, what do we think the theater creator was investigating? Now, this was a really interesting production, and I would almost call it more of a poem than a play, but I know that it's a play. I would say that through incredible uses of rhythm, synchronicity, repetition, and abstract nature of storytelling, not a scene to scene necessarily, but a wider berth, epic story. I think that Denom Welsh is investigating or similar to our other artists discussing the indigenous perspectives that have been ignored throughout the past. I think similar to 1939, this story acts as a reclamation of indigenous identity to both indigenous audiences and participators, but as well as just the indigenous perspective. It is such a beautiful it does such a beautiful job at using themes that are prominent in indigenous culture, like repetition and like story rhythms and switching up story rhythms in different chants and stories and songs. Those are very prominent indigenous ideals, and the fact that they use those ideas dramaturgically to express, the difference between the whitewashed removal of history and culture and the golden enriching in the ground and in the water, as we see in the story, survival of indigenous culture that also occurred, with the seven grandfathers and these traditions being able to still be passed down through rhyme, through memory and music, through the power of repetition, and the fact that these are ideas that Janny herself was hitting on in our talkback is so prominent to then see in a different indigenous artist by Spy Denom Welsh's works. So I think it's another, again, a more subtle but beautiful reclamation of indigenous identity and culture, just like 1939, but in a different way and executed in a different way. 1939 used more Western styles of storytelling, and as I did mention earlier, I do think it's interesting that this almost does read like a Homeric epic poem, almost, with the way that the storyline progresses. The way that the characters use rhythm to remind the audience of the most important values of the peoples who are reading the story. It's very well done, and it almost does read like Western, but it's not. It's being spoken the way that indigenous traditions usually express their stories, through their songs and through their powwows and etc. And I've had the pleasure of being able to observe some of those in the past, and it's so interesting and such a pleasure to be able to throughout this class explore the many different ways that we can see perspectives be reclaimed through things like theater and the simple dramaturgical things that use that. And I'm just going to go right into the next question because that's a perfect segue. So one of the scenes that I really loved, the moment specifically, was when Manto Kiwe and the Golden Fish Boy are both chanting together, both north and west, both north and west, cleansing the spew, cleansing the medications, and they're going through that chant together. I think it's beautiful. It's one of multiple moments where they're speaking together, and I think that's awesome because, again, it highlights that synchronicity and the strength of how in theater synchronicity can often come off as community and a more bold and stronger community message. And Janny herself talked about a lot how she wanted to use synchronicity because, again, it showed that this was a community's message, a broader experience. And them speaking it together, I think, even further signifies that idea in this production, that by having multiple people say your message, at least with the indigenous perspectives we've seen, that is a prominent idea in their culture, and so a powerful tool to use in their theater that we haven't gotten to see because, unfortunately, that's not in Western theater as much. So the fact that they were able to use synchronicity in such a creative way and rhythmically change it up in the speaking dynamics I think is such a cool audio way to not highlight power dynamics, but highlight character relations and greater cultural contexts that the dialogue and then therefore greater play could be hinting to. Again, asking the audience to further explore the message. It's just so beautifully done. And I mean, for the question that I would ask her necessarily, um, I guess I would go with, do you think that in presenting this scene in a more abstract nature and with hinting towards the contexts that you may need to understand to be able to understand the story, do, do you think that it would be behooved of the directors who are putting this production on, say if they were to provide further context and prior context to Indigenous experiences so that they don't view the story from an a lens of ignorance, and instead view it from a lens of learning and reconciliation? And is there prior context that, or does the show speak for itself? And like I said earlier, inspire its audience enough to want to do better and do more research. But is that, do we want to put that trust into the audience, or do we want to try and push it a little more? It's an interesting question. I'd be interested to see how she would think of it. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed.